Picture this, you round a corner on a hiking trail, and there it is, a snake, close enough that you could reach it in 3 steps if you wanted to. And it does nothing, no slither into the brush, no warning hiss, no sudden strike. It just stares back at you, utterly motionless, like a photograph of itself. For a few seconds, you're both just standing there, frozen in some kind of silent standoff. And in that moment, almost everyone thinks the same thing. This animal is terrified. It's paralyzed with fear. That assumption feels obvious. It also happens to be completely wrong. And once you understand what's actually going on inside that stillness, you'll never look at a snake encounter the same way again. Let's start with a fact that surprises most people. Snakes don't have the brain structures required to experience fear the way humans do. Human fear runs through a specific network, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the limbic system, all working together to produce that racing heart and paralyzing dread we know so well. Snakes simply don't have that architecture. What looks like fear from the outside is really something closer to an automatic decision process. A rapid calculation running beneath the surface rather than an emotional experience. Once you accept that starting point, the behavior itself starts to make a lot more sense. So if it isn't fear, why stay still at all instead of just running? The answer comes down to 3 separate factors, and understanding all 3 together is what makes this behavior finally click. The first factor is the simplest and also the most important. Movement is exactly what gives a snake away. Most predators, humans included, have a visual system that is extremely sensitive to motion. That's precisely why so many snake species depend almost entirely on camouflage to survive. Their skin patterns aren't just decoration. They are the product of millions of years of selection, shaped specifically to blend into dry leaves, loose dirt, cracked rock, and tall grass. So when a snake first notices a threat while it's still some distance away, running is actually the worst option. Running means moving, and moving means becoming visible in a way stillness never would. Staying frozen lets the camouflage keep doing exactly what it evolved to do. And there's a real chance the threat simply walks past without ever realizing the snake was there at all. In other words, that stillness isn't helplessness. It's a calculated bet, camouflage over speed, and it's a bet that works far more often than most people assume. That bet isn't made blindly, though, and this leads into the second factor. Behavioral scientists have a term for the exact point where a threat becomes close enough that fleeing finally makes sense. Flight initiation distance. This is the invisible line where the cost of staying still starts to outweigh the cost of moving. And that line isn't fixed, it shifts depending on the species. On how well the surrounding environment supports camouflage. And on whether the threat is heading directly toward the animal or simply passing nearby without much interest. If you're standing some distance away and you're not moving straight at it, there's a good chance you're still outside that snake's flight initiation distance. It will simply hold its position, quietly continuing to assess you, rather than burning energy on an escape that isn't necessary yet. It's only once you cross that threshold, once you get close enough that the risk calculation flips, that the behavior shifts into its next stage. That might mean fleeing. It might mean a warning display like a raised head or a rattling tail. In some cases, if the animal feels truly cornered, it might mean a defensive strike. Now here's the third factor, and this one has nothing to do with strategy at all. It's pure biology. Snakes are ectothermic, meaning they can't generate their own body heat internally the way mammals do. Their muscles function best within a fairly narrow temperature range, and outside that range, everything slows down. If a snake's body temperature is low, whether it's early morning, deep shade, or a cool overcast day, its ability to move quickly is seriously compromised. In that state, attempting to flee wouldn't just be slow. It could actually be more dangerous than standing still because a sluggish, uncoordinated escape attempt draws attention without offering any real advantage in speed. So sometimes a snake isn't choosing stillness because it's the theoretically smartest move available. It's freezing because, in that particular moment, its body genuinely isn't capable of doing anything else. Put those three factors together: the camouflage advantage, the flight initiation threshold, and the temperature-dependent limits on movement, and you get a much clearer picture of what's actually happening during that frozen standoff on the trail. It isn't panic, it's a live calculation, constantly updating based on distance, temperature, and risk. And stillness is simply the answer that calculation is producing in that specific instant. What makes this even more interesting is that the exact strategy isn't identical across every species. Some snakes, like copperheads and many vipers, tend to hold perfectly still and rely almost entirely on camouflage until a threat gets extremely close, only shifting into a warning posture or a rapid tail vibration once danger becomes immediate. Other species push this idea to a completely different extreme. Take the hognose snake. When it feels genuinely cornered with no other option left, it doesn't just freeze quietly, it performs. It flips onto its back, lets its tongue hang loosely out of its mouth, goes completely limp, and even releases a foul odor designed to mimic decay. It's a full act of death, staged specifically to convince a predator that there's nothing worth eating here. And just like ordinary freezing, this isn't panic either. It's a fixed behavioral sequence, automatically triggered the instant the right conditions line up. So if none of this is fear, why do we keep reading it that way? The answer says more about human psychology than it does about snakes. We're wired to anthropomorphize animal behavior, to project our own emotional experiences onto creatures whose nervous systems work nothing like ours. When we see something go completely still, our brains reach for the only reference point we actually have: the memory of freezing up ourselves when we were genuinely scared. That mental shortcut feels natural, but it doesn't hold up biologically once you're talking about an animal that evolved an entirely different survival toolkit along an entirely different evolutionary path. So what does all of this actually mean the next time you're standing a few feet from a motionless snake? A few things, and they matter. First, never mistake stillness for safety or tameness. A snake that hasn't moved has not accepted your presence, and it hasn't decided you're harmless. It's still actively assessing the situation, and what happens next depends entirely on what you do. If you keep stepping closer, you're pushing it toward that flight initiation threshold, and the next reaction might not be stillness anymore. Second, if you ever find yourself close to a snake that's frozen in place, the correct response is to back away slowly. No sudden movements, no quick jumps, nothing that mimics the kind of motion a predator would make. Give the animal room to make its own next decision, whether that's continuing to hide or retreating to shelter once it senses the threat has passed. Don't reach toward it, don't poke it with a stick to see what it does. And don't assume that because it isn't moving, it must be docile or weak. That single assumption, that stillness equals harmlessness, is one of the most common reasons people get bitten across the United States every year. It's rarely a case of a snake attacking without warning. It's almost always a case of someone mistaking careful stillness for surrender. And finally, understanding this behavior reframes something much bigger than just a single encounter on a trail. It changes how you see the animal entirely. This isn't a fragile creature trembling helplessly at the sight of a human. It's a species executing one of the most refined survival strategies found anywhere in the natural world. A strategy so effective that it's been carried forward, almost unchanged, for tens of millions of years. So the next time you round a corner and find yourself face to face with a snake that isn't moving at all, you'll know exactly what's happening underneath that stillness. Not fear, not panic, a quiet, precise calculation, running exactly the way millions of years of evolution designed it to run. Weighing camouflage against speed, distance against risk. One motionless second at a time.